Hello and welcome to a Firstpost POV. There's a new and escalating front in the trade war between the United States and China. Rare earths. These are 17 minerals that are found in the Earth's crust, and right now they are at the center of this trade war. These rare earths go into making almost everything in our lives right now, from fighter jets to mobile phones to the electric vehicles that are taking over the world. But here's the problem. China has a near monopoly when it comes to these rare earths. They dominate some 70% of the mining and 85% of the extraction. And this has created a chokehold which China is now weaponizing. The question is, how did they create this monopoly in the first place, and how is the US and its allies looking to break it? Let me put some of these questions to my guest, Mr. Terril Jones, who's a senior journalist, and he's been someone who's been tracking China for years. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
Happy to join you, Prathik.
Let's address that first question. A 70% share in mining and 85% share in extraction is not something that happens organically. Clearly, China planned it to be this way. How did they reach this near monopoly in rare earths?
Well, China always thinks in far more long-term terms than the United States government and even American companies. Partly it's because of years-long investment in countries around the world, especially in places like Latin America and Africa that have such minerals and have tied up deals where the United States had not made such moves. Another is the way that they've always required foreign companies, when they come into China for investment, to transfer technology, and usually the highest technology that's available. This has been seen with many industries, in particular, automobiles and other high technology, so that the technology gets transferred, and China is then able to innovate based on those fundamentals and produce something that is much higher. They've also invested in just the kind of infrastructure and engineering that they need to do for such things as mineral extraction in just a much more planned way than the United States has. And so much of this happened kind of, you might say, when the United States wasn't looking.
Right. Now, so was this foresight on the part of the political leadership in Beijing? Was it on the mining side or the private sector in China? Who identified this potential for the rare earth minerals going forward? And also, why did the Western countries, or indeed the rest of the world, fail to realize the potential of these rare earths?
I think it's a little bit of both the state planning and the enterprise. Often they are close to one and the same in China. And so there was identification of where do we need to catch up, and do we have any opportunity for dominance? And with the extraction of such metals in China, which has deep reserves of that, they're able to kind of corner the market. It's hard to say how the West sort of missed this or ignored it. I think it's just a lot of insular planning on looking at a combination of self-reliance. How can we, do this based on what we have here at home, and just caught up in domestic politics, which are distracting attention from a lot of long-term planning.
Right. Now, we've read a lot about how these minerals are extracted. It's a very specific and precise process. We only need a small amount of these to make the things that we do, but still mining it is a very complicated process. Would you be able to tell us how mining a rare earth mineral, for instance, is different from the normal mining that we see on an everyday basis in countries across the world? What's so special about this that the Chinese have cracked it and the rest of the world is struggling really hard to match up?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not being an expert in this kind of technical mining and all. I think the Chinese have identified ways to make things smaller, things go a long way. Technically, they just invest a lot in the technology that is very specific and that is needed for very specific goals. Targeting an industry such as automotive industry or aircraft or fighter jet manufacturing is something that is very strategic and dear to the government itself. Just in cases of automobiles, the population is so large and the wealth has been rising so much in recent decades that China now builds 50 million cars a year, has the capacity to build 50 million, while the United States only has the capacity to build 10 million, which is quite a reversal from 15 to 20 years ago. And China views exports markets extremely strategically, and in the case of automobiles, where rare earths and rare earth magnets are so crucial, China exports to 100 more than 100 countries around the world, automobiles and electric vehicles, except to the United States and Canada. And that's part of the sort of insularity and lack of a global view on the American side.
Right. I think most countries agree that we need to break China's chokehold, but the problem seems to be, how do we do that? Mr. Trump has a strategy which is to essentially include rare earths in almost every bilateral dealing that he has. We saw him talk about rare earths with the deal with Ukraine, Pakistan, now a deal with Australia as well, which involves some $8.5 billion in investments. What do you make of his strategy right now to diversify away from the Chinese rare earth industry? Is it a viable strategy in your mind?
It could be. China has a is said to have a policy of make the world depend on China, whereas many other countries, including certainly Donald Trump's administration, want to make China dependent on the world. It's by setting up some ventures, such as in Australia, where they can extract some rare earths from a more friendly government rather than a rival government. That's one way they can move forward. I mean, searching for any reserves elsewhere in the world. But China, again, has the long-term view. And, in the United States, with the change of presidential administration, a lot of policies can be reversed or abandoned. And so it will be tough to really drill down, literally, and achieve other alternative sources and maintain them going forward, which I think is the big question.
What do you see as the biggest challenge, though? Is it the fact that China has such a massive head start in this industry? Is it the fact that the allies of the US are not able to come together to find out some sort of common ground on how to move forward in the rare earth industry? Is it the lack of private partnership in this industry? What do you see as the biggest challenge to diversifying away from the Chinese supply chain?
Yeah, kind of all of the above, but certainly the strength that China has in the backing of its government with its industrial policy. There's sort of the centralized government and manufacturing, import, export, and extraction policies that where industries are hand in hand with the government, with basically the same interest, and the command structure of the Communist Party's control over most of industry mean that China doesn't have fluctuations in its policy so much, and so I think that is how the problem where the U.S. its own policy within the country and the government can change, and the relations with other countries sort of come and go, fluctuate with the comings and goings of different leaders. So there isn't a consistency toward that policy, and it doesn't. The West doesn't have the same united front that China itself proposes.
Right. You mentioned the state subsidies and the support that's given by the Chinese government to these companies. Do you think that's a route that the West and the other countries should explore, pumping billions of dollars in public spending to create an alternative to the Chinese supply chain?
I mean, that's a possibility. It's just that there's budget issues and deficits are always such a big issue. For example, in the United States, and right now with I mean, every expense that comes up is going to be scrutinized and criticized, and even something that of a much less value, like the $230 million that Donald Trump is seeking from the Department of Justice right now, is small change by comparison. I think if Americans, the public, really sees and feels the pain and the problems of not having such a unified and concrete policy, then yes, that's a definite possibility. It is probably what, in terms of necessity, it's probably what the U.S. government should do, because this is crucial and this is urgent. And this is not something you can say, let's put a 10-year plan in to try to develop something. Just under the current administration, I think it would be difficult, just because there's so much spending going in so many different directions and so many just issues that are pulling the administration and the attention of the American public in so many different directions, that it will take kind of a real crisis, whether it's in terms of automobile prices, which are already quite high, including used cars, or a decision somehow that yes, we must turn to an electric car infrastructure, which the Trump administration is very much against, for something like that to happen.
What you said about the public not knowing a lot about this is actually quite right. Even here in India, there's not really a lot of understanding about how crucial this technology is and how it's important for the green shift and for your chips and fighter jets, all of that. But in that context, do you fear that if Donald Trump has a deal with the Chinese, he may not stick with this diversification for long and he'll just say, I'll keep buying rare earths from China. It's not like the American people care. Let's just shelve this whole diversification plan and keep buying from the Chinese. Is this just about the trade deal and leverage over that? Or do you see this as a long-term policy in Washington?
I think under the current administration, there are a lot of short-term fixes and short-term policies that solve something or cover up something that is temporary, more temporary than permanent, especially in trade relations. I mean, just look at tariffs. They come and they go. Quotas come and go. Sanctions, which may not be, which sometimes are put over trade. I mean, as we know, the Trump administration is trying to put high tariffs on India for buying Russian energy and other issues. But that's not something that's a long-term policy, and again, could change with a different administration in place in the United States. And so I think it's there does need to be a long-term policy for crucial industrial measures. And the thing is that, well, what if some rare earth reserves are discovered somewhere else? Or what if Australia has a greater supply than they thought? Or what if there's some technology that supersedes the need for such large quantities of rare earths? Something needs to be put in place for the foreseeable future, and that looks like at least 5 years or so. But again, within or after 5 years, that could change.
Right. Finally, let me just ask you, how do you see the Chinese weaponizing this monopoly that they have? We've already seen them impose some amount of curbs, and that has filtered down the supply chain and affected EV sales and things like that. What more cards do the Chinese have when it comes to these rare earth minerals? Where else can they pressure the supply chain?
Well, the military industrial complex is another one besides just automobiles, which is a huge part of the U.S. budget and expenditures. But Americans, Americans love and need their automobiles, and if you somehow make automobiles more expensive and out of reach, which they're beginning to become, with the average cost of a used car, not a small car, but a full-size sedan or a sport utility vehicle being $30,000 or more for a used car, that hits Americans really in the pocketbook. And I think if China, just by staying firm and steady, like they often do in either trade negotiations or just other kinds of political standoffs, can sit it out, and the American economy, the American consumer, may not be able to sit it out. And so that's where the greatest risk is, that the public, the voters, will feel in their pocketbooks and in their lifestyle that we can't continue, we can't go on, we can't support these kinds of prices, then what's the U.S. government going to do? Are they going to start subsidizing costs of importing automobiles? So it is a serious situation that has the potential to really fester and burst if the U.S. doesn't find either an alternative source for these resources or alternative technologies that might bypass the need for such resources.
Right. I think in the strategic circles, at least, there is an understanding that this is what has to be done, that the dependence on China is not sustainable in the short run or the long run. But the question is, can that strategic will be really converted into long-term policy? Can it shape public mind so that the governments are more confident to invest in alternatives? We'll be tracking how this rare earth war unfolds in the world of geopolitics and in the trade war between US and China. Thank you so much, Mr. Terril Jones, for speaking to us.
Thank you, Prathik.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.